Good day. My name is Thomas Minnie and I'm a senior practicing attorney at the Thomas Minnie Attorneys in Pretoria. Over the past few weeks and few days, I've received numerous inquiries from ordinary citizens of South Africa relating to various issues that all become relevant during the COVID-19 lockdown period. At the outset, let me say this, that although we have not all become infected by the COVID-19 virus, we have undoubtedly all become affected by its consequence. In light of this, I made the decision to record these broadcasts and attempt to, on a daily basis, keep the South African public informed regarding various issues that may have become relevant and that may touch their lives as a result of the lockdown. We will be dealing with various issues over the next few weeks and few days, and it appears that the most important one that most people are asking about is relating to their residence, the rent. What happens if I don't pay my rent? What happens when my tenant does not pay his rent? What can I do? What can they do to me? These questions I will attempt to answer in a very short synopsis of the rights and obligations of both the landlord and tenant with regards to residential properties. The issue of commercial property is also relevant. We will be dealing with that at a later stage in a different broadcast. But for today, we're going to have a look at the situation, the legal situation with regards to residential property. Now, the regulations that were published, as we all know them, the lockdown regulations, if I can refer to them as that, were published as a result and in terms of the Disaster Management Act of 2002. What most South Africans don't know is that there are numerous directives and regulations that were published subsequent to that publication, as well as on the same day as that publication. Now, the reason I'm mentioning that is because some of these publications, directives and regulations will be relevant to your specific circumstances, and therefore you should make sure that when you obtain legal advice that the legal practitioner considers these documents as well. Relevant for this discussion is the amendment regulation which was published on the 15th of March 2020, in which a regulation was inserted, Regulation 11, capital letter C, capital letter A, which states that no person may be evicted from their place of residence regardless of whether it is a formal or informal residence or a farm dwelling for the duration of the lockdown. Now, in analyzing the rights and obligations of the various parties, we need to first have a look at various issues. The first issue is whether we are dealing with a commercial or residential property. I've already indicated that the commercial property aspect we'll be dealing with at a later stage. The second issue we need to look at is whether there is a written agreement or not. And then the third issue is whether you are in fact the landlord or the tenant. At the outset, let me say this, that both landlord and tenant have rights and obligations in terms of a rental agreement. Whether such agreement is in writing or oral, both parties have rights and obligations. The ordinary South African generally adopts the attitude that as a tenant, the landlord is unreasonable and that they should accommodate them. At this juncture, it's important to realize that those landlords also may be the owner of the property, and that property which they are renting out may also be their source of income. So as affected as the tenant has become with regards to not being able to pay the monthly payments, so too the landlord also relies on that income. It is on this basis that my opinion regarding the solution to this problem would be an approach by both parties, the landlord and the tenant, of give and take. If we are not going to work together in this crisis, then unfortunately we are not going to see it through. When we have a look at the contract itself, some written agreements have a clause which we refer to as the vis major, force majeure, irresistible force, act of God. It has numerous names. It all means the same thing. It is a event, huge magnitude, that is unforeseeable. Many contracts have this clause in them, and the clause itself dictates what must happen in the event of such an occurrence. Now, because there are numerous ways in which this clause can be worded and the consequences are also vast, it is not possible for me at this stage to advise you regarding the solution to your specific contract. That will only be possible once you have actually read what is written in the written agreement. The second possibility is that there is no such a clause in the written agreement, and the written agreement would then stand as it is. The next possibility is that there is no written agreement at all, and that the parties simply have a verbal agreement. Now, depending on your circumstances, it is in all likelihood the common law that would have effect on your situation, and the common law clearly states that in the event of an act of God and performance by both parties is not possible, then neither party would have the right to demand performance from the other. So, depending on your situation, it may be that the common law is applicable to your situation, and that in that event, you would not be liable to pay rent, and a landlord would not be entitled to enforce the payment of rent. That being said, in most cases in South Africa, the landlord in fact gave occupation to the tenant as we went into a lockdown period where most tenants were inside their residence. I therefore say that in most cases it is possible that there may be exceptions. I'm not going to deal with all of those at this stage. With regards to the general position, the landlord has now given the occupation to the tenant, and the tenant is now liable to pay whatever is due. As you are aware, many tenants have not received salaries. Many tenants work for themselves. They are sole proprietors, directors of small companies, and they also have generated no income. My advice to both tenant and landlord is to utilize the mechanisms that have put in place by government. Government specifically put in place the employer-employee relief scheme, in which both employer and employee can claim against the unemployment fund. It is indeed so that not the full payment of your monthly salary will be paid, but there will be a portion paid. Negotiate with your counterpart. Phone your landlord, phone your tenant, speak to them. Be bona fide in your relationship and your dealings with the other party. Come to an agreement where at least some payment is made. The rest of the payment will be deferred, possibly caught up in small batches over a period of time after the lockdown has been lifted completely and the tenant is starting to earn an income. It will be just as difficult for a landlord to obtain a new tenant in this period. And let me assure you, the court will not be favorable towards a landlord who now seeks to evict a tenant who has not been able to pay their rent due to circumstances beyond their control. The sympathy in these cases like this, I submit, will lie with the tenant. It is therefore important that the parties attempt to resolve this matter prior to resorting to legal action. There is also other facilities and mechanisms available. For example, most banks are offering a payment holiday to landlords that have bonds over their property. My advice is phone your bank, make arrangements, explain the situation. Most banks are fully aware of what is going on. And to tenants, you may also obtain payment holidays, possibly not in respect of your lease that's payable, your rental, but on other payments, for example, your motor vehicle and other payments that are due, your other accounts you could phone and make arrangements, and those savings may then be collectively put towards paying a portion of your rent. Please further be advised that should you come to an arrangement with your landlord or tenant, please reduce this arrangement to writing and sign it between the parties in order that there may be no dispute in the future regarding what has been agreed upon and when both parties will be expected to perform. Be aware that the President, Mr. Ramaphosa, has recently passed the mechanism which will be followed for the lifting of the lockdown, and this will take place in phases. It is therefore important to consider your individual circumstances regarding when you expect to receive an income and when things will return to normal, as it appears that this may be for a few months. Consider those aspects before entering into agreement. Please further note that nothing contained in this broadcast should be construed as legal advice, as your specific circumstances may be unique and needs to be evaluated independently by a qualified legal practitioner. You are therefore advised to contact your legal practitioner and obtain advice regarding your individual circumstances. Should you, however, have any further queries, you are more than welcome to contact me, the details of which will follow after this broadcast. In closing, I wish you all safety and Godspeed.